yes, Glock perfection. And when I think of Glock perfection, I often think of not just my favorite gun, but my favorite caliber. And that usually makes me think about something like the Glock 41. And that makes me think, geez, wouldn't it be nice if you could actually carry the Glock 41 as a self-defense handgun? But as you probably know, Glock 41 is just about the biggest Glock there is. So that's pretty impossible. So while you have the reliability and the durability and the proven track record of the Glock in the fantastic caliber, all of which you can say all the same things, reliability, durability, and proven performance of the 45 Auto, there's just, for mortal people of the size that I am, there's just no way to carry this thing, right? Unless you live in Fargo and wear a parka 10 months out of the year, this is not feasible as a carry. That might lead you to think, well, what about the Glock 21? I mean, the Glock 21, after all, has been around a long time. The Glock 21 is pretty much the de facto 45 ACP polymer-framed handgun, yeah? Well, same thing applies in my case. You can't carry this gun. I mean, this is not a carry gun. It's a duty gun. It carries outside the waistband. There are a number of departments around the country, around the world, and military that carry the Glock 21 as a duty weapon. But that's a sidearm, right? So for concealed carry, still not really in the realms of possibility. But boy, it sure would be nice. I mean, what if you could have almost this exact package in the size that you could carry and was truly a viable everyday carry option? How awesome would that be? And still have some decent capacity. Well, what about this? The Glock 30S. The Glock 30S is just about a perfect solution to that problem. You've got the reliability, proven track record of Glock. You've got that great Glock design. You have the 45 ACP and the punch of the 45 automatic, the proven track record and the reliability of that round. And you have all of that and capacity in a pretty small package. Something you really could carry. So yeah, the Glock 30S is 45 ACP. It is a Glock, of course. It's a good-sized frame because it has a 10-round magazine. So you've got a full 10 rounds, 10 plus 1, right? So you're walking around with 11 rounds of 45 ACP. And you've got a pretty decent-sized frame in terms of girth, but very short in the grip. So the butt of the gun is short, and that's an important dimension. So Glock was paying attention there. And they've made this gun just about as thin as they felt they could make it and still give you some capacity. I know you can get the Glock 36, which is thinner, but also diminished capacity. Something I've been accused of myself. So the Glock 30S is a relatively new offering from Glock. It's been out for over a year, so it's not brand new. But this particular one is brand new to me. It does still have that brand new Glock smell. So from the tip of the barrel all the way back to the beaver tail, or what passes for a beaver tail on a Glock, is just a hair under 7 inches. That's not too bad. That's a pretty respectable length. You are still staying well within the realms of comfortable concealed carry. Because the length, as we all know from our studies, the length is not the most critical measurement when it comes to concealed carry. The height of this gun, and now we are getting into important measurements, the height from the top of the sights to the very bottom of the magazine is just under 5 inches. 4.8 is what Glock calls it. So again, under 5 inches. This is an important measurement because as you carry a gun, this is the part of the gun that's going to print. This is the part of the gun that's going to stick out when you bend over to tie your shoes or depending on how you're dressed and so on. It's the very butt of the gun. You have to worry about the length. The longer that is, the harder it is to conceal. Now, the width of this gun is published at 1.27, and that is about the same number as a number of other Glocks, including the baby Glock. And that's relatively thin. That's thin for a Glock. There are definitely guns out there that are thinner, and there are guns that are out there that are thinner in this caliber. But that for a Glock, that's pretty thin. The sight radius, we talked about the overall length being just under 7 inches. The sight radius itself, from the front dot, and the actual dot, not the front of the sight, but from where that actual dot is to where the little underdog U is on the back, is just under 6 inches. It's published at 5.9. So here to here, 5.9 inches. That's actually, if you've got a 6-inch sight radius on a small carry gun, that's a pretty good sight radius. Barrel length is 3.77 inches on this gun. So just under a 4-inch barrel. Again, not bad. It's a good length for a carry gun, and it's going to give you additional accuracy and a little bit of additional velocity as well over some of the shorter, closer to 3-inch barrels. The weight empty is 22, almost 23 ounces. 22.95 published is the empty weight of the 30S. So just about a 23-ounce gun. Still pretty light, carryable. Obviously, when you load it up with ammo, it gets much heavier. Then you're getting into, close to 2 pounds worth of gun and ammunition once you get that thing fully loaded. This is a Generation 3, okay? So the Glock 30S is only available as a Gen 3. There is still talk that it'll come out as a Gen 4, and it likely will at some point in time. But at the moment, it is only available as a Gen 3. What that means really is a couple of things. The stippling on the grip is going to be the less aggressive texturing of the Gen 3, so you've got that sort of softer, smoother grip. I kind of don't care too much about that because I've already got my Talon grip on order. It's already in the mail. It's already on its way. So it's not going to be long. There's going to be a rubber Talon grip on this gun anyway. The finger grooves are actually nice, and the checkering that's molded into the finger grooves and in the back strap is good. But the side panels, as we all know, leave something to be desired. Other element of a Gen 3 means it's going to have that smaller Gen 3 magazine release. So the mag catch, smaller release button, sticks out a little further, but it's smaller, not as easy to get to. Everything inside looks like we would expect it to. You see that beautiful copper lubricant that Glock puts in their new guns. I've only got about 50 rounds through this. I've put about 50 rounds through this gun so far, and that's it. And I've cleaned it up a little bit. I keep it lubed, but you want to keep that copper lube in the gun as long as you can. Let that wear off. Don't clean it off. That's good stuff. But you notice we have the dual recoil spring on our guide rod. And that is, even though that's typically associated with Gen 4, the captured dual spring guide rod assembly was introduced to the compact Glocks of Generation 3 as well. And of course, our barrel, and again, 3.77 inches, so almost a 4-inch barrel. Not bad. Our typical Glock polygonal rifling. Nothing special in the frame, no surprises. Built like a Glock. Let's compare the 30S to the 21. Look at the difference there. You can see, and if I have to tell you which one's which, please hit the stop button right now. Walk slowly away. You can see there's a pretty significant difference. And, length is an obvious one, but, just the width of that slide, too. You can see the difference in the width of the slide. and also the shape. You notice that the Glock 30S has that front tapering, which is going to make it a little easier to reholster. Also takes a little of the edge off, pardon the pun, at the very front of that gun. So if you've got an open toe holster where that gun sticks out, that's a little less brick sticking out the bottom of your holster. You can see from the back, also shows the difference in the thickness of the slide. And it also kind of shows that, the frame itself, that grip is not all that different. So we definitely we pick up a lot of space in our slide, but we're not picking up that much in our frame. We can compare it to the 41 just for fun. You'll notice the 41 obviously is enormously longer, but you'll notice that the slide of the 41 is not wider, because that was one of the main features of the slide, or one of the main features of the Glock 41 was that reduction in slide width. There is one thing that is very, very significant that these three guns share, and that is this. This is the standard Glock 21 13-round 45 ACP double stack magazine. Glock 41 takes that same magazine, right? Now, the Glock 30S takes a 10-round magazine. However, the Glock 21 magazine will fit perfectly. So the Glock 41 and Glock 21 13-round magazine will fit and will function perfectly in the Glock 30S. So what does that mean? Well, that means, and I hate the overused and often misused term weapons system. People have gotten to where they're calling their pocket knife a weapons system. But that really does make the Glock 21, for example, and the Glock 30S a weapons system, especially if the 21 is your duty gun. The 30S might be your backup gun or your off-duty gun. If you run this 10-round magazine dry, you can reach for a 13-round backup magazine, and it's going to fit and function. That gives you huge capacity opportunity, depending on how you want to carry it. Or if you're just looking at a situation where the Glock 21 may be your designated home defense gun, the Glock 30S might be your concealed carry gun, you can interchange that magazine in one direction only. Obviously, the Glock 30S magazine is too short and wouldn't seat in the 21 or the 41. It would fit every other way, it just wouldn't go in far enough. It wouldn't function. But you can take the higher capacity 13-round Glock 21 magazine and use it in your Glock 30S. Something important to consider, and that is that's a nice benefit. All right, so here's another neat little bonus advantage of the Glock 30S. Let's say that for some time you have perhaps been carrying the baby Glock, the Glock 26 or the Glock 27, either in 9mm or 40. And that's been your everyday carry, but you're thinking about going to a 45, and you're thinking about which one you might want to go to. Well, one of the things that I will submit for your consideration about the Glock 30S is this. Here's my Glock 26 in its holster. Glock 30S fits exactly in the same holster. Glock 30S fits perfectly in my Glock 26 in the waistband holster. Love it when you buy a new gun and you don't got to buy new gear. You can see that it obviously protrudes a little further because it's a longer gun, but in every other way, it's exact. So, Glock 26, Glock 30S. Same holster, same fit. That's a huge bonus. So now, speaking of the baby Glock, the Glock 26 and the Glock 30S, let me drop this mag out of here just for a moment. Let's take a look, because you may be familiar with the Glock 26 from a carry perspective, this is, of course, a 9mm gun. This is the 45, but look at the dimensions. Okay, now the length, yeah, we know the length is longer, but that's in my opinion, that is an insignificant difference in length from a carry perspective. That width of the slide, I think, is identical, and I can put a caliper on that, but I believe that is an identical width of the slide. And I think the frame is virtually identical as well. If you look at it backstrap to backstrap, you can see that. See, those dimensions are really the same. The width is really the same. So if you're used to the thickness of the Glock 26, the Glock 30S, very, very similar. The place where you're going to see a difference is going to be here in the height. So you're going to see that the Glock 30S, and especially when you put the magazine, the Glock 26 magazine fits pretty flush. The Glock 30S magazine has a bit of an extension. So you'll see a difference there. And that is a significant dimension, so that's something you may have to think about. If that's going to be too much, then you may want to think about whether this is right. But that's really the only significant dimension, is the height. The length, again, in my opinion, is insignificant in terms of carry. It is significant in terms of sight radius and you know, shooting the gun and all that, but it's insignificant in terms of concealed carry. It's almost like, you know, there's your baby Glock in the 45 ACP world from Glock. So it's sort of the baby Huey, the baby Huey Glock, they should call it. Okay, so as I said, I haven't put a whole lot of rounds through this gun yet. I've only put about a box through it, about 50 rounds through this, and I have a target that I'm going to show you. I'll either cut it in here and overlay it, or I'll just show it as a little separate piece. But I have a target where all 50 of those rounds went, and so I'll show you that. And it was a mix of some relatively fast shooting and some slower, deliberate shooting, you know, to try and see how it would group. All just shooting offhand, and I was either at like between 7 and 10 yards, somewhere like that. So, you know, your kind of standard self-defense distance. Okay, so here's the target I shot the Glock 30S at. 45 ACP. I shot 50 rounds total. What you're looking at is 40 rounds. They got a little squirrely here and there as I shot a little faster, but right in here was the majority of the shots, and that's good. I'm happy with that. It's a great sight picture. You know, it's your typical Glock sight picture, but that almost 6-inch sight radius does really help. So this was just offhand shooting. Some faster shooting, some slower shooting, just a sort of a mix. Just, you know, what you do when you get a new gun. You take it out, you open a box of ammo, and you just shoot. That's what this was. Now, the very last 10 rounds, for the very last 10 rounds that I shot through the gun, I went to the head of the target, since that was a clean area. Didn't have to tape anything. Those are the last 10 rounds I shot, and I was deliberately a little more methodical. So that's a nice group. If you put a tape measure on that, the farthest 2 shots away are probably still 3 inches or less. So happy with that. It's a good shooter. It's a sweet shooter. Feels a lot like the Glock 26. Obviously, I just showed you those comparisons, and it should feel a lot like the Glock 26, and it does. It carries a lot like the Glock 26. This dimension is a little longer, so you've got a little bit more sticking out the bottom here to deal with. Although, if you're one of those guys who, if one of the things about the baby Glock that bugs you is the dangling pinky, and if your hands are the size of my hands, you'll be real happy to see that the Glock 30S gives you a pinky rest with that magazine. So if that's a big deal to you, that's a plus. I was impressed, almost downright surprised, what a soft shooter this gun is. I was ready for, okay, it's 45, it's a small, concealed gun. It's gonna bark at me a little bit, and I was ready. I was leaning into it when I took my first shots, and I was like, hey, what was that? So yeah, I was surprised how soft this thing shoots, how well it handles the 45 ACP. It just had a nice roll to it. If you're a shooter and you shoot 45 much, you'll probably understand that. Hopefully, what I mean by that. But it just had a nice roll, and I found it a lot of fun to shoot. And the sights came back to a sight picture really quick. It stayed pretty flat, and I'm looking forward to shooting a lot more rounds through this gun because it was quite enjoyable. And it's accurate. I found it to be very accurate, but it is a Glock. Glocks are accurate. So there you go, the Glock 30S. There's the first look. You will see a whole lot more from this guy. Coming soon, I promise.